and welcome to Medill Newsmakers. I'm Brenna Ordonez. Thank you for joining us. We begin today with the migrant crisis here in Chicago. As of mid-May, city officials were still searching for additional spaces to turn into shelters and respite centers as migrants continue to arrive and current shelters reach capacity.
What we're doing is trying to get people connected to shelter, legal aid assistance, and other resources as they arrive. We are really overburdened, and the situation has really become untenable. So what we're seeing right now is we don't have enough beds or enough space for migrants to stay at.
City officials looked at high schools, colleges, and field houses as possible shelters. This was shortly after police departments across the city began housing migrants.
Getting them into a more suitable setting where they can receive the medical attention, where they can receive those resources, and where they have a bed and, a shower and stuff like that is really going to be the humane way to treat the migrants, while also freeing up the police to focus on what their job really is, which is, fighting crime.
Since 1985, Chicago has been declared a sanctuary city. This declaration has inspired over 9,000 migrants to rapidly flock to Chicago since August of 2022. However, Chicago officials say the number of migrants arriving to the city has dropped after the expiration of Title 42 on May 11th. Title 42 was put in place by the Trump administration at the start of the pandemic and allowed for the swift expulsion of migrants at the southern border. In the weeks leading up to its expiration, concern grew that a surge of migrants crossing the border was imminent, but that's not what happened. I traveled to El Paso, Texas a few weeks after Title 42 expired to see how the end of this pandemic-era rule was impacting the migrant crisis at the border. This is what I found. The border separating Ciudad Juarez, Mexico and El Paso, Texas is quiet as fewer migrants are crossing. While an exact reason for the drop remains unclear, Border Patrol officials say they believe the recent enforcement of a long-standing immigration law might have something to do with it.
Title A is a much harsher policy that effectively criminalizes migrants.
Under Title 8, migrants who get deported are banned from entering the United States for at least 5 years. To minimize the risk of deportation, migrants wanting to cross the border are encouraged to use the CBP One app to file their asylum claim and secure an appointment to enter the U.S. lawfully. However, concerns over the app's efficiency are circulating.
So what the Biden administration, I think, was doing was trying to put a step forward to solve the situation. But I don't think they were listening to the people on the ground. The app glitches. The app sometimes doesn't facially recognize their pictures. The app sometimes doesn't open. I believe there were some waiting periods too for the app. To think that migrants have access to internet, access to a cell phone, it's already far off. A lot of these people barely have the necessary resources to carry on their daily life to feed their families.
These issues have resulted in many migrants, including 30-year-old Colombian migrant Royman Faria, to bypass the app altogether.
I turned myself into immigration on May 8th at 11:40 a.m. Thank God I got the opportunity to move forward with my asylum case.
During that initial immigration screening, Faria was able to choose the city in which he wanted to continue his process in.
Since I was in Colombia, I've always played basketball. My dream team has always been the Chicago Bulls. So when people ask me where I'm going, I say I'm going to Chicago Bulls. And they tell me it's not Chicago Bulls, that it's Chicago, but that's why I chose the destination. I like Chicago even though it's so cold. I still want to get to know Chicago.
Once in Chicago, Faria will plead his asylum case in front of a judge. If his case is denied, Faria will be deported back to Colombia, thwarting all his dreams.
I'm searching for a better future, good connections who can help me realize my dream. I love music. I sing salsa. I love salsa.
And making the treacherous journey to the U.S. all for nothing.
There are people that lost everything for this journey. They left everything for a life in the U.S.
Faria remains on the streets of El Paso, sleeping on the pavement just outside of Sacred Heart Church. Here he is joined by twin sisters Joseani Lama and Josemar Lama, who spend their days recreating TikTok dances on the streets of El Paso while they wait for a resolution. Faria met these girls on the journey to the U.S.
They've been a great support. With my broken arm, they have helped me with medication or with getting food. I am alone. I don't have anyone here in the United States. I came alone, so when I found them, they became my family.
Faria hopes to earn enough money in the coming weeks so that he can afford his fare to Chicago. He says he will deeply miss these girls when the time comes for him to leave.
Saliendo del hospital después de ver a mi mamá luchando contra un cáncer que no se puede curar.
According to a report conducted by Syracuse University, as of November of 2022, there were nearly 1 million asylum cases pending in the U.S. immigration court system. For Medill Newsmakers, I'm Brenner Doniaz. Up next, Lead in Our Water, how local organizations are fighting for safe drinking water. This and more after the break.
Here is my handle and here is my spout.
When I get all steamed up, then I shout,
Tip me over and pour me out. Oh. The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Cheers. Take time to be a dad today.
Oh, look, a redhead. Staring contest. You still got it. I know.
Come alive with the forest.
The dad was cute.
You were looking right at us.
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year, 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism, 1 in 68. I'm Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Wow, these are really good.
You act surprised. Practice makes perfect.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. There are thousands of teens in foster care who don't need perfection. They need you.
Welcome back to Medill Newsmakers. I'm Mia Bearden. Everyone deserves access to clean and safe drinking water, but unfortunately, not everyone has it. Experts say toxins like lead can enter your water stream and cause many negative health effects, such as high blood pressure and infertility. Children are our most vulnerable population. Elevate is a Chicago-based nonprofit that works to deliver lead-free water to children in underserved communities. I spoke with Ruth Kersey, a senior project manager in water programs at Elevate, and has worked in public health for 30 years.
We wanted to educate childcare providers on the fact that lead impacts the health of particularly children under the age of 6, which of course, equals all the kids that are in childcare pretty much. And so we wanted to make sure that information was given to the childcare providers because lead does impact the nervous system of children, and it's permanent damage that cannot be, it can be accommodated, but it can't be undone. And so we wanted to make sure that this community really understood that children were the folks that were being impacted the most by lead in water. And children drink more water per kilogram of weight than adults do. So when our water is contaminated with anything, children are overly impacted or more seriously impacted by those contaminations.
You may have heard that as long as you boil your water, it's safe to use. That is not the case when it comes to lead in water. Kersey shed some light on a few misconceptions that she wants to clear up.
We do try to tell people that boiling water does not actually reduce lead, it only concentrates the lead because lead is a metal. It's an elemental metal, so it cannot be destroyed. And so you're just concentrating the lead in the water by boiling it. So that's a big misconception, which makes perfect sense because we're always said contaminated water, we think bacterial contamination or whatever, and certainly boiling can help with that, but not with lead. So that's one misconception. Another misconception is that it doesn't affect adults. So it can affect adults. It can lead to high blood pressure. It can lead to, depending on your levels of exposure, it can lead to infertility. It can lead to a lot of different things. Also, it does cross the placental barrier. So if you're pregnant and drinking water that's contaminated with lead, that can pass on to the fetus. And often people don't know that. They think of, that as sort of some sort of barrier that can't be passed, but that's not true for lead. So it can impact adults and it can impact pregnant women in particular and their fetuses. So I think those are some of the biggest misconceptions about lead. And, that whole idea that lead can be tasted, that's another thing, or smelled. It cannot be. You cannot tell whether the water has lead in it by the taste or the smell or anything else. If your water smells bad, it's not because of the lead. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's good to know that if your water smells, it's not lead, but a different problem altogether. Thankfully, there are lead prevention methods that you can use in your own household and that is sustainable long term.
You can't know if there's lead in your drinking water without testing. So you really do need to test your drinking water to see if there's lead in it. We tested residential water before installing a water filter, for example, and then after, and it was shown that the water filters, all the samples that came back after the water filters were installed came back with lead not detected. So essentially 0 lead. Filtering's great, right? We love filtering. It does work. But it can do a lot of different things, like if your water pressure isn't decent. But often I'll point people to filtering. The trouble with filtering is if you don't have the economic means to buy replacement filters continuously, it's only as good as that filter, and the filter has a lifespan. I think what is truly sustainable, if you're focused on just individuals, so individual residents, individual units, sustainable at this time might be simply being super aware and flushing your water. If there's any chance that it was stagnated for any length of time, if you can go ahead and flush the water for a period of time, that can be very useful and relatively inexpensive, although you are paying for that wasted water.
In order to truly fix this issue on a larger scale, what is needed is resources, money, and help from government officials, all of which, according to Kersey, are severely lacking.
As we know, there's something upwards of 350,000 lead service lines in the city of Chicago alone, and we're thinking it's around 1 million for the state of Illinois in general. And right now, the funding would never cover even a fraction of that. So we really do need to figure out a system for pulling money in to remove these as part of our overall goal for how we address infrastructure issues. It's just money, money, money. I mean, we just really need some sort of funding stream in order to address the needs that are out there. I mean, until we have full commitment or the commitment from the entities that provide that funding, we have a hard time. Our goal with legislators and educating legislators is that this is the size of the problem, this is the impact of the problem, this is what we see as the solution to the problem. We just want to raise the awareness of the problem overall so that they can put pressure on those that have the ability to affect change to move that needle.
According to Kersey, in the face of lead in water, there needs to be meaningful change that reflects the needs and priorities of communities that are affected by fighting to support equity for those with a lower economic status and children. It's important to remember that lead poisoning is not reversible. It's treatable in some ways, but the damage is done. Thanks for watching. I'm Mia Bearden. Up next, find out what's happening with book banning in the LGBTQ+ community after the break.
Welcome back to Medill Newsmakers. I'm Lena Folk, coming to you with state politics, social justice, and books. This May, Illinois Secretary of State Alexi Giannoulias initiates a House bill with legislative focus on preventing library book bans. In the proposal, the state will only grant funds to libraries that follow the Library Bill of Rights, which encourages libraries to challenge censorship. This bill not only shows its support for the material in Chicago public libraries, but also for privately owned libraries with no collection budget. One of them is the Gerber Hart Library and Archives. A private nonprofit business in Rogers Park, Gerber Hart holds the biggest collection of LGBTQ+ material in the Midwest.
We were started 42 plus years ago as a means of basically kind of thinking ahead to times like we find ourselves in today, where public libraries that may have collections featuring LGBTQ plus books and resources are being challenged.
I'm aware that I know very little about just the queer experience, whatever that means. But it is nice to be around so many different versions of that with the materials that are being offered. And I've been reading a lot of the zines in the archives right now. That's been really exciting for me. And I really feel like I've been connecting to a piece of history that I've longed for.
I mean, even though we're a completely private institution and not, we're not public in the sense that we're funded by taxpayer money, this messaging, these book bans and sort of the scare around public libraries, this still also affects us.
In data collected by the Office of Intellectual Freedom in the American Library Association, it is evident that book bans across the country have increased over the past year. This graph was featured in the 2023 State of America's Libraries Report. And you can clearly see this jump from 2021 to 2022. In just 1 year, over 700 new book titles were challenged, nearly doubling the number of books banned in 2021. When looking at this data more closely to us, the Chicago American Library Association reports that Illinois had 67 attempts to ban books, an increase from the 41 attempts in the previous year. Thus, Giannoulias' call for action.
I think that Gerber Hart would be impacted in a general sense in the same way that Illinois would be impacted.
In large part, we were created because it was a space that other institutions were not collecting these materials or didn't deem them important.
We can't depend on the legislature, state or federal, or on the city to defend the interests of the queer community. Historically, that's never really happened.
Amongst some of the nationally banned titles are I Am Jazz, This Book is Gay, and Gender Queer, all titles which explore gender identity and sexuality. In addition to meeting with Gerber Hart staff, I spoke with the unit head of special collections at Harold Washington Library Public Library Center, Johanna Russ, about Giannoulias' House bill and the importance of preserving LGBTQ+ material. Russ provided me with her thoughts as to why there is such a growth in book bans across the country.
There's, especially with the queer themes, such a fear that one of a family member or they themselves will be queer, and I guess that's the worst thing they could imagine, which is sad. But I think it's all really based in fear and lack of understanding.
Although Chicago is known for its generally accepting attitude towards the LGBTQ+ community, that doesn't mean that Gerber Hart hasn't faced its challenges of homophobia and transphobia.
2 weeks ago, we received a really threatening phone call from a stranger, telling us that we were perverts and that we were destroying the country and that we were corrupting children because we exist and that we were a threat to America.
Gerber Hart staff member Jen Dentel had a similar experience over the phone a few weeks ago.
And so I was asking him questions, and then he started saying how disgusting we were, and this was what was wrong with the country. So that was jarring. I think we are in a very safe, supportive bubble in Chicago, specifically in our communities. And so I think that there is a reminder that is very present and that is very current and still something that is a threat.
Gerber Heart's operations director, Erin Bell, said she also came across negative comments when looking at the email submissions for Gerber Heart's volunteer sign-up form.
We have started to get at least one message through like a form that we use for people who are interested in volunteering. So that to me says that somebody took the time to go onto our website, find any way of like reaching us directly and use that as a way of leaving us an unkind comment.
Despite this recent pushback, Gerber Heart remains passionate about being an LGBTQ+ library and doesn't plan on letting any harassment stop their organization.
Gerber Heart asks that anyone wanting to make donations or become involved with volunteering can visit their Facebook, Instagram, or website. Thanks for watching. I'm Lena Folk. Up next, sports reporter Adam Becker takes us to the WNBA's Chicago Sky with players' thoughts on potential expansion. Stay with us.
If you want to be a parent, it doesn't matter how you play, what you wear, how you dance, or even what direction life takes you. You just need to be there. You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care don't need perfection. They just need you.
Every day across America, excess food is gathered by a network of good people at local food banks, giving hope to millions of children who struggle with hunger. They've earned their wings, and you can too. Together, we can solve child hunger. Support Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Cook foods to the right temperature using a food thermometer. 3,000 Americans will die from food poisoning this year. Keep your family safer. Check your steps at foodsafety.gov.
Really? Buzz, what's up, man? You left some leaves burning out here.
Yeah, I just came in just for a second.
Come on, man. If it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave. You could torch the whole neighborhood.
It's a good point there, Smokey.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome back to Medill Newsmakers. I'm Adam Becker. League expansion was once again a topic in the WNBA offseason, but unfortunately for the players, there still were no changes. The league remains at 12 teams, with the most recent expansion team being the Atlanta Dream in 2008. With 12 roster spots per team, that leaves 144 spots in an ever-growing league. In comparison, the NBA has 30 teams, with each team having up to 15 roster spots. That's a total of 450 spots. Players left on the outside looking in have to resort to playing professional basketball abroad. With final roster cuts coming towards the end of the preseason, expansion and the lack of spots was on the front of players' minds.
We soon know. Because it's been talked about for a long time.
Yeah,
and
facts.
we still haven't done anything about it yet. So it's like, okay, each year we know a draft comes. Each year we have WNBA season. So it's like, come on, let's try to get together and come up with something so we can, next year we can make this big. And now we have players who aren't worthy of it and sitting at home or have to wait until overseas start again to go back overseas far away from family versus being in, you know, the States and you're able to play in front of your family and friends and stuff. It's just different, but hopefully they get on it soon.
10 players on the Sky roster have played in Europe in this most recent season. For the ones unsure of a long-time roster spot, the lack of teams adds an extra layer of pressure to the preseason. Instead of just getting into form before the season, players have to worry about their futures.
More teams, we won't put as much pressure on ourselves, you know, as a player when we go into these camps to be so perfect. Because that's what it feels like. We have to be perfect.
I remember my first training camp and it was like, you know, it was kind of scary, honestly, you know. It's like I was coming from a team where, you know, a league where I was one of the best in the league. And then now you get to the WNBA and all of a sudden you're just fighting to stay on the roster.
So it's a stressful situation because it's basically a tryout for 2 weeks. It's, for me, the mental side was always one of the hardest because, yeah, you're trying to show that you deserve to be on this team. So
every day someone gets cut.
2 weeks, show your
to
worth.
Show what you can do.
The hell?
I mean, these coaches know what we are capable of and what we can do because they watch us all year. That's why they bring us to their team. But it doesn't always work like that.
Yeah.
It depends on what that team needs or, just different things that come with it. But I think if it was more teams, it would be a lot better when players go into training camp.
Playing when knowing the ramifications of getting cut adds a mental obstacle on top of the physical one that the players have to go through. It's another thing they've learned to handle through previous training camps and preseasons.
How do we deal with limited jobs? Fighting, literally, you have to rely on them like they're your sisters because you have nobody. I'm far from my family. 12 months out of the whole year, I'm away from my family. Chicago, away from my family. Italy, it's the first 7 months away from my family. And these have to be your sisters. And the first day, okay, this is my friend. The second day, this is my sister. Cause how do you survive without having someone that you can relate to? We're alone probably 90% of the day unless we're with the team, and we're so exhausted, especially in training camp. You're so exhausted, you go straight to bed, you wake up and you start all over again. So imagine not liking your teammates. It's hell. I'm so sorry, it's so bad.
The mental challenges is super important that as a collective we're able to separate our worth as basketball players from our worth as individuals, and it's really hard in this environment because sometimes you get caught up in the job is me, the basketball is me, but in order to stay kind of on task in these really mentally challenging environments, you don't know when you're going to get cut. It's quite difficult, but if you can separate, speaking for myself, if I can separate my self-worth and the way that I see myself outside of the job that is basketball, obviously I'm super passionate about it, but it means on the off days hanging out with my teammates, it means going out and exploring Chicago, it means seeing things and building up myself outside of basketball, so this becomes less mentally challenging and it stays enjoyable and it stays full of passion and fun, and so we aren't defining ourselves with just that, the sport, but where, the sport is a part of who we are, but it's not our full identity.
Yeah. For me, like she said, for the most part, when I go into camps, it's I know I put in the work all season long. I know all summer I've been working my butt off, working very hard. So when I come into camp, before I went to camp and I got cut, I would, be crying or trying to figure out what am I not doing right, but the whole time it's not always about about me. So I had to basically beat into my head no, you're overseas, you're doing your part, you're working hard, you're showing what you're capable of. So when you go to these camps and you don't make the team, it's okay. Walk out with your head high. Don't cry. Don't be down. You did your part. It's just you're just not what they need, or this is just not your time. So that is something that has helped me mentally get through, training camps and just being a basketball player as well.
All three of you have.
If the WNBA needed to gauge its popularity before expansion, the Sky played a part in showing the game's growth. The Sky played the Minnesota Lynx in Toronto this preseason for the league's first ever game in Canada. It sold out well before the day of the game, showing the sport's popularity in Canada. The Sky beat the Lynx 87-74. That's all for this episode of Medill Newsmakers. I'm Adam Beckett. Thanks for tuning in.